صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
اللهم صل على أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب أخي نبيك ووليه وصفيه ووزيره ومستودع علمه وموضع سره وباب حكمته والناطق بحجته والداعي إلى شريعته وخليفته في أمته ومفرج الكرب عن وجهه قاسم الكفرة ومرغم الفجرة الذي جعلته من نبيك بمنزلة هارون من موسى. اللهم والي من والاه وعادي من عاداه وانصر من نصره واخذل من خذله والعن من نصب له من الأولين والآخرين وصل عليه أفضل ما صليت على أحد من أوصياء أنبيائك يا رب العالمين.
علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي 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 مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي 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 مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي. حب علي فوز الشيعي غدا فامدد لي في يوم حسابي يدا وانقذني من نار جحيم وهل رمت شفيعا غير إمام الهدى. إن صلاتي ثم صيامي إذا لم يشفع لي حيدر ضاعت سدى. يشهد ربي أن بروحي لهم حبا دوما قلبي فيه شدا. صهر الهادي أنت مرادي علي صهر الهادي أنت مرادي علي 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 مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي 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 مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي 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 مولا علي علي بشخصك يا حيدرة البشر، هتفت بمديحك مولاي السوار. نورك من أنوار الله انتشر، ملأ الدنيا غطى نور القمر. نفسك نفس الهادي طه الأغيار، وبك اكتمل الدين وعم الظفر. ذكرك خالد حبك شاهد علي، ذكرك خالد علي. علي علي مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي 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 مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي 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 مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي 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 مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي علي مولاي، علي 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 مولاي.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا تدركه الشواهد ولا تحويه المشاهد ولا تراه النواظر ولا تحجبه السواتر، الدال على قدمه بحدوث خلقه وبحدوث خلقه على وجوده وباشتباه أن لا شبه له، الذي صدق في ميعاده وارتفع عن ظلم عباده وقام بالقسط في خلقه وعدل عليهم في حكمه. تقدست أسماؤه وتظاهرت آلاؤه، لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. ثم شرائف صلواته ونوامي بركاته على عبده ورسوله الخاتم لما سبق والفاتح لمن غلق والمعلن الحق بالحق، الدافع جيشات الأباطيل والدامغ صولات الأضاليل، العبد المؤيد والمنصور المسدد، المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد، سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد، الذي بلغ الرسالة صادعا بها وحمل على المحجة دالا عليها، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا، ولا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته في العالمين. روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه فداء، واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم وغاصبي حقوقهم وجاحدي مناقبهم ومنكري فضائلهم من الآن إلى أبد الآبدين. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الشريف. My very respected viewers, may Allah bless you and keep you well. Please accept my greetings of peace and love and respect. Assalamu alaikum. May Allah help us and give us the capacity to love Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and to follow Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and to recognize their path, their discourse, and to obey their discourse and to follow their path. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. The topic of our discussion continues to be Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Shi'a jurist. We have defined what it is. What does the guardianship of the jurist mean? So please refer to the previous speeches, because the speech is just going to be a continuation of what we have already been describing and explaining. One of the important proofs and arguments that have been preferred, that have been advanced by the followers of Velayat-e-Faqih, by the defenders and promoters of Velayat-e-Faqih, and this very well-known hadith in which the holy Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam says, فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Now, hakim actually means a judge, an arbiter, or you could say an arbitrator. However, the same word is also used in Persian and Farsi quite a bit, and also in some other languages that have borrowed words from the Arabic language. And in some of these languages, including Persian, the word hakim commonly means and widely means the ruler, the sovereign. So a number of Persian-speaking jurists have been confused, and they have deduced, because they were thinking in Persian and Arabic was not a language they mastered well, they took the statement of the Imam alayhi salam as, verily, I've appointed him over you as hakim, which actually means a judge. They, because of being Persian and because this notion already saturated their minds that hakim means a sovereign, a head of the state, they have concluded that the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam has appointed the narrator of hadith as the sovereign, as the head of the state over all the world, the entirety of the world. So that, according to them, would explain why the jurist is entitled to be the head of the state everywhere in the world. In all the world, they are illegitimate if a Shia jurist is not at its peak, not at the top of the pyramid power. Now, I have showed to you through books of dictionary and some other way possible for me to explain that hakim does not mean a ruler. So I'm going to further strengthen my point, and inshallah, tabarak wa ta'ala, I'll try to drive this point home. And then we'll be done with the maqula of Umar ibn Hanbala. Then we'll be done with this hadith. So one of the ways that I could prove to you that hakim indeed means qadi, hakim means a judge, an arbitrator, is by going to this verse of the Noble Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 188, the chapter of cow, verse number 188. Here we go. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا. Allah Ta'ala says in the Noble Quran, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا. And do not eat up أَمْوَالَكُمْ, each other's property, بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Do not each other, do not consume, do not take over, do not eat up each other's property in a wrongful manner. In other words, if a person is not giving you permission to use his property, to take his property, to have his property, do not take over his property. You need the pleasure, you need the consent of the actual owners of a property in order to use it, in order to control it, in order to make a use of it. And then the Noble Quran says, وَتُدُلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ. The law, this no, don't, this law means don't, means don't. This don't also comes here. وَتُدُلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ. And do not deliver, do not offer, do not bring your properties to the judges. In other words, do not bribe the judges. Do not bribe the judges. لِتَأْكُلُوا. Do not bribe the judges so that you may eat up طريقا من أموال الناس, a portion of other people's property. Because if you have a case before a judge and you bribe the judge, you give him a very good and generous gift, and the judge will issue a decision that's in your favor, although it's a wrong decision, but it is in your favor. You are not allowed to bring your property and deliver that to the judge as a bribe. That is not permissible. So do not offer your properties, your your things to the judges. This hukam, al-hukam. This is the plural of hakim, So this is the very word that we are dealing with in the maqbulah of Umar ibn Hanbal. Hukam is the plural of. This does not mean a sovereign. This does not mean a head of state. This means judges. And inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, I'll prove that to you from the sayings of the noble Imams alayhi salam. بِالْإِثْمِ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So do not deliver your properties, do not give your properties to judges in bribes, so you may consume, so you may take over, so you may usurp the properties of another people in a wrongful manner, and you are aware that this is wrongful, that this is not something you can do. So let's go to this book. This is Tahdhib al-Ahkam, one of the 4 major works of hadith of the Shi'a, compiled by our late Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi, Sheikh al-Tusi, may Allah bless him, volume number 6, published by Maktabat al-Saduq in Iran. Here we go, page number 245, hadith number 10 on this page. Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Faddal says that I read in the book, because as I've told you before, at the times of the holy Imams alayhi salatu wasalam, and in the eras right after the times of the holy Imams alayhi salam, Shi'a were very rich in their books. So Shi'a had many, many thousands of books of hadith. One of those books of hadith was by this companion of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. His name is Abu al-Asad. And he is one of the companions of the holy Imam Rida alayhi salam, and he has narrated from Imam Rida alayhi salam. And he was an author. So Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Faddal says that I read in his book the following, that he wrote a letter to Al-Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, وَقَرَأَتُهُ بِخَطِّهِ, and he had written, I read the letter with his own handwriting. So he had asked the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam about this very verse number 188 in Surah Al-Baqarah, that do not deliver your properties to the hukam. He had asked, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مَا تَفْسِرُ قَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى. What is the interpretation? What is the exegesis? What is the exegesis? What's the interpretation? What is the meaning of this statement of Allah in the noble Quran? وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. And do not eat each other's property up in a wrongful manner. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ. And do not deliver them. Do not offer them to the hukam. What does it mean? قَالَ فَكَتَبَ إِلَيْهِ بِخَطِّهِ. The narrator says that Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam responded to him with his own handwriting. What was this handwriting? Al-Hukkamu al-Qudat. Al-Hukkam, Hukkam, Hukkam, Hukkam is the plural of what? Hakim. Hakim is what we are dealing with here in Maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbal, right? And al-Qudat is the plural of Qadi. Qudat is the plural of the Qadi. So al-Hukam al-Qudat. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam responded to him and said, al-Hukam means al-Qudat, judges. Hukam is the plural of Hakim. Hakim means a judge, and Hukam, since it's plural, it means judges. ثم كتب, and then the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam further wrote, And the second line under the first line, هو أن يعلم الرجل أنه ظالم فيحكم له القاضي. If a person knows that his case is wrong, his opponent in that case, he is right. My claim and the case is wrong. My opponent's claim is is correct. His claim is valid. And still, the judge gives a decision in my favor. In such a case, I have no excuse. I have no excuse to accept the judge's decision. I should inform the judge that no, there's this, my claim is wrong. That person's claim is valid. Please change your decision in his favor. So if the judge he rules out in my favor, فهو غير معذور في أخذه ذلك الذي حكم له إذا كان قد علم أنه ظالم. If that person knows that he is the abuser, that he is the transgressor, then he has no excuse before Allah not to inform the judge, not to inform the other party that he is wrong, and he should not take over that property that is being contested. At any rate, what you understood from this verse is quite clear, and from the hadith of the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, that indeed Hakim means al-Qadi. Al-Hakim means al-Qadi. And now, this very, very simple semantics of the hadith, the meaning of the term used in the hadith. فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I've appointed him. Appointed whom? Appointed the narrator of hadith as a judge over you. Not being able to clearly understand this hadith has led a number of jurists, because of the misery that we have and the travesty that we have in our seminaries, whereby Arabic is not studied properly and hadith is not properly studied. And many, many ahadith, and this is very common, ahadith are interpreted according to the same words meaning in Persian or the same words meaning in the modern Arabic, not in classical Arabic. And this has many, many examples. And the tragedy is now, on the basis of this hadith, that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam has appointed the narrator of, not mujtahid, narrator of hadith, as an arbitrator in disputes. This has been further extended to a very, very preposterous claim that's quite different from the statement of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. And that preposterous claim is the mujtahid. He has been appointed as the sovereign, as the head of the state, by the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. And if you pay close attention to this hadith is not talking about the time of occultation. This hadith is not speaking exclusively about the time of the ghaibah, the time of occultation of the 12th Imam alayhi salam. This hadith is talking about the time of the presence of the Holy Imams alayhi salam as well. So, mujtahideen's argument would mean even during the presence of the Holy Imams alayhi salatu wasalam, mujtahideen are the heads of state in the Islamic world, or the whole entire world. Now, having offered the meaning of Hakim from books of dictionary, from Quran, and from Hadith, let's go to the works of grand and respected scholars of Shi'as and see how they have understood from this term. فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I have appointed him as Hakim over you. Have they understood the same meaning, the same notion that Khomeini claims and Naraqi claims that this hadith implies, or they have understood something else? This is مرآة العقول في شرح أخبار آل الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم تأليف المجلس. Volume number 1 of مرآة العقول, which is an exegesis, a book of interpretation of the noble and holy and sacred book of Al-Kafi. Published by Dar al-Kutub al-Islamiyya, volume number 1. And we'll go here, page number 222. As you will see here, this is the maqula of Umar ibn Hanbala, and this is the statement. This is the term that concerns us. فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I have appointed him over you as a hakim. Does hakim mean sovereign? Does hakim mean a sovereign? Does hakim mean the head of state? Does hakim mean the person who rules over lands? or does it simply mean a judge? And not just any judge, a judge only in disputes that two sides agree, two sides have a mutual agreement, consent that we are going to go to this person for arbitration, not an official judge with power to execute his decision, not a judge with a power and capacity to enforce his decisions. No, only a judge, an arbitrator, in which the mutual disputing parties, they mutually, both sides, they agree and they mutually have a pact that they will accept this person's the decision as long as his decision is according to the hadith of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. So, page number 223, here we go. Allama al-Majlisi. Majlisi talks about this phrase in this hadith, مقبولة of Umar ibn Hanbala. قوله فإني قد جعلته عليكم حاكما. This is the statement of hadith. Verily, I've appointed him as hakim over you. واستدل به على أنه نائب الإمام في كل أمر إلا ما أحوجه الدليل. It has been argued by certain figures, by certain personalities, that the person in question, who is in question? Narrator of hadith. And of course, mujtahideen would claim that narrator of hadith means mujtahid. And that's obviously wrong. Narrator of hadith does not mean mujtahid. But that's another dispute for another day. So, some mujtahideen, some of them you know, such as Khomeini, such as Naraqi, some individuals, they have claimed that this statement of the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam means that the mujtahid is the deputy. He is the deputy of the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam in every affair and every affair. إلا ما أخرجه الدليل, except إلا ما أخرجه, except those sort of duties that have been exclusively considered for the Imam alayhi salam. Something that we know that's the exclusive right of the Imam alayhi salam. For instance, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has a right to marry more than 4 women. Other people do not. Or if we consider that to initiate jihad, the initial jihad, al-jihad al-ibtidai, in order to force other nations to embrace Islam by the force of the sword, this jihad has been banned by the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam, that you may not initiate this jihad, this sort of jihad. That no one can initiate this sort of jihad. Which jihad? Initial jihad. Jihad, not in defense, but jihad in order to expand Islam, in order to force other nations by the power of the sword to embrace Islam. In other words, to compel other people to accept Islam. This has been banned by Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu wasalam. No one can carry such a jihad except an infallible Imam. When he comes, the Imam alayhi salam comes, and Jesus comes, and together they can initiate such a jihad. Until that time, no one else can carry out such an enterprise. So if we know, and now this matter is contested, but some mujtahideen say, no, this is not the exclusive right of the Imam alayhi salam. We can do this also. And they totally disregard and totally reject numerous ahadith on the subject. And this is quite common, that mujtahideen quite commonly reject hadith and issue fatwa that go contrary to hadith. But usually the common Shia, they think it's their understanding, it's their impression, and they have this false narrative being repeatedly retold to them, that mujtahideen only they give fatwa according to Quran and Sunnah, because Quran and Sunnah is so difficult, common people cannot understand it. Therefore, they make it easy for us. They spoon feed us. They make it easy for us, and they give only fatwa that are consistent with Quran and Sunnah. But at any rate, he says, Majlisi says, this segment of the Maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbal, فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I have appointed him, the mujtahid, according to mujtahid, as the hakim. They have used this segment to argue that the mujtahid is the deputy of Imam alayhi salam in every affair, in every way, in every field, in every aspect of life, except those few situations that have been excluded, that we know they are excluded. Nobody is a deputy of Imam alayhi salam in those affairs. On all other affairs, the same authority that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam enjoys, the same authority that Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam enjoys, the 12th Imam alayhi salam enjoys, the same authority is enjoyed by Mujtahid. Now goes Majlisi as follows. وَلَا يَخْلُو مِنْ إِشْكَالٍ. This is quite questionable, such an argument based on this hadith. The hadith doesn't say that. The hadith simply says that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam appointed him as an arbitrator in disputes. And this, that he is a deputy of the Imam alayhi salam in every affair with every sort of authority, that's very far-fetched when you compare that to the verbiage, to the wording of, and to the words used in the hadith. وَلَا يَخْلُو مِنْ إِشْكَالٍ. However, this assertion is very questionable. Rather, what is the apparent meaning? The apparent meaning, the seeming meaning, the clear meaning of the hadith is as follows: أنه رخص له في الحكم فيما رفع إليه. This the mujtahid or narrator of hadith, he has been permitted to rule in disputes, to issue rulings, to issue judicial verdicts. In other words, to be an arbitrator in those disputes that are presented to him. So he doesn't have a responsibility to act as a judge or an arbitrator. No, only when those cases are presented to him. So he is not required. The narrator of hadith or the mujtahid is not required. He's not obligated to force other people that you have to accept my authority as a judge. No, if two people mutually agree that we are going to have this person look at our dispute and have him review our dispute and review our claims and then have him arbitrate between us. And only in such cases, then he has to settle that dispute and act as an arbitrator. لا أنه يمكنه جبر الناس على الترافع إليه أيضا. He is simply an arbitrator, and he has no authority to force other people to come to him in order to solve their problem, settle the dispute. نعم يجب على الناس الترافع إليه والرضا بحكمه. Of course, it's obligatory for the common Shi'a to refer to him, to go to him in their disputes. And if he issues a command, if he issues a judicial verdict that is consistent with the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, to agree to that ruling and to follow that ruling. So, Majlisi clearly rejects the notion entertained by Khomeini in his lives. شرح أصول الكافي by Mullah Muhammad Salih al-Mazindarani. This is another very respected and very well-known exegesis of the noble book of Al-Kafi by Mullah Salih al-Mazindarani rahimahullah, published by Muassasat al-Tariq al-Arabi in Beirut, Lebanon, volume number 2. And this individual, the author of this book, has passed away a few centuries ago. And he was contemporaneous. He was younger than Majlisi, but it seems to me, as I recall, that he was related to Majlisi. He was married to Majlisi's daughter. He is a son-in-law, as I understand, I recall. So here is page number 337. فليرضوا به حكمان الحكم بفتح الحاء والكاف الحاكم وهو القاضي. Hakam means hakim and hakim means qadi. Hakim means judge. Hakim means judge. Clearly here stated. This is Kitab al-Wafi, another very valued book of exegesis of the noble Kafi. Kitab al-Wafi by Mullah Muhammad Muhsin al-Fayd al-Kashani rahimahullah, a scholar of immense service to Shia and immense knowledge and many, many books that are very beneficial and well-researched books. Especially this book, Kitab al-Wafi, is very valuable. And as you know, our holy books of hadith have very few books of exegesis, very few books of interpretation. And one of the best ones is Kitab al-Wafi. And I'm showing you books that are the cream of the crop. And these individuals, they have all concurred that فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Hakim, Imam alayhi salam is saying that I've appointed him as a hakim over you. It means I've appointed him as an arbitrator over you. Kitab al-Wafi by Mullah Muhsin Faid al-Kashani, volume number 1. Here we go, page number 287. فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I've appointed him as a ruler over you, a hakim over you. Ruler, sovereign, or arbitrator. What does it mean? What does it mean? So he goes, الظاهر من جعل رجل حاكما تفويض جميع مناصب القاضي لا مناصب الإمام إليه. What it means? It says الظاهر. When you say الظاهر, how you translate الظاهر? الظاهر means the apparent meaning of this phrase. The apparent meaning of the phrase of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is that he has appointed someone as hakim. It means that he has given him the position of a judge, not the position of someone who is going to be the deputy of the Imam alayhi salam in all affairs. And that is not something that I'm adding to his words. That's exactly his word. لا مناسب الإمام إليه. تفويض جميع مناصب القاضي. All the authorities of a judge has been given to him, not the authorities of the Imam. That is what it means. فإني قد جعلت عليكم حاكما. Verily, I have appointed him as a judge over you. كتاب الشافي تأليف ملا خليل القزويني. Now, these other books of exegesis of Kafi that I'm going to show you, they are not as valuable as the earlier 3 books of exegesis of Kafi. Al-Shafi, this is also a book of interpretation of Kafi, written by Mullah Khalil al-Qazwini, volume number 1, published in Iran. Let's go here, page number 568. فإن قد جعلت عليكم حاكما. الحاكم يستعمل في العام من المفتي والقاضي بخلاف الحكم فإن أكثر استعماله في القاضي. He says a hakim is sometimes used with regard to mufti. Mufti. Hakim is used with regard to whom? Someone who is a mufti. It's used in that sense, or to describe someone who is a mufti, someone who issues fatwa, or a judge. Hakam, however, hakam is exclusively used for qadi. So this person here again, he is also confirming our statement that hakim means qadi. However, is hakim used to refer to people who issue fatwa, to the mufti? That is not because its meaning, the word's meaning is mufti. That is because often it used to happen that people who were judges, they used to issue fatwa. They used to issue fatwa. Although the giving a fatwa is different than settling disputes between people and when they're contesting before a judge. However, usually a qadi, because he was a scholar, he also used to issue fatwa. Sometimes it's the case that hakim is used for a person who is issuing fatwa. However, that's not its meaning. Its meaning is, as I mentioned time and again, that hakim means a judge. This is Al-Kashf al-Wafi fi Sharh al-Usul al-Kafi, ta'alif, written by Muhammad Hadi al-Shirazi. This is also a book of exegesis of Al-Kafi. He died at year 1081, Hijri Qamar, 400 years ago. Okay, let's go here, page number 284. فإني قد جعلت عليكم حاكما. Verily, I have appointed him as hakim over you. It means صيرته حاكما وقاضيا عليكم. I have made him a judge over you. That is his interpretation of the hadith as well. And then he goes on the next page, page number 285. ثم الظاهر من الحاكم القاضي. The quite clear meaning of hakim is qadi, is a judge. Now you heard the words of various people who have explained the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam and their capacity as commentary writers over Al-Qur'an. Let me show you some words of jurists themselves, the mujtahidin, what they have understood from this uh, statement of the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, opposing view to Khomeini. Obviously, if you present these discussions in public in Iran, you will perhaps not see the daylight next day. You will be dealt with quite violently, and perhaps you would disappear. Something mysterious is going to happen to you. But these books were written before the Iranian Revolution, centuries ago. And the books that I'm going to show to you, they were written before the Iranian Revolution by people who were not controlled or censored by the Iranian Revolution. This book is نهج الفقاهة تأليفه السيد محسن الطباطبائي الحكيم. If you remember Al-Hakim, Sayyid Muhsin al-Tabatabai al-Hakim, he was the grand marja of the Shi'as who practice taqlid before the widespread marja'iyya of Al-Qasim al-Khoury, before the widespread marja'iyya of Khomeini. So this is a generation before Khoury and before Khomeini. And when he died, then Khoury's marja'iyya became very after Sayyid Muhsin, and he used to live in Najaf al-Ashraf. And he died in the 70s. I do not remember, middle 70s or 60s. He died quite a time ago. Allah bless his soul. This is his book, Nahj al-Faqih. Volume number 1, published in Najaf al-Ashraf in 1371 Hijri. So now it's 1442, 71 years ago, this book was published in Najaf. Wilayat al-Hakim al-Shar'i. Now we are talking about Wilayat al-Faqih. And the author presents, and he doesn't, the author, said Muhsin al-Hakim, he does not go in great detail. It's his style to write uh, in a succinct manner, in concise manner, not to waste too many words. So he mentions about 5 or 6 or 7, I don't remember the exact number, of hadith that have been used by the promoters of Hidayat al-Faqih. He mentions them, and then he rejects them one by one in a concise manner. So, page number 299, Wilayat al-Hakim al-Shar'i, he mentions that there are people who have argued for the Wilayah of Faqih, that the jurist has this representation. He has this position of being a deputy of the Holy Imam alayhi salam with vast authority. Please. So he mentions the ahadith here. Majari al-umur, al-fuqaha, umana al-rusul, several ahadith that have been used by those individuals. And then he goes to Maqbula ibn وما في مقولة ابن حنظلة قد جعلت عليكم حاكما. I may have appointed him as a hakim over you. Then he gives one general answer to all these ahadith. He says, لا يخفى أن ما ورد في شأن العلماء مع ضعف سند بعضه قاصر الدلالة على ثبوت الولاية بالمعنى المقصود. He says all these different ahadith that have been transmitted by the holy imams alayhim salam, or that have been narrated by the holy imams alayhim salatu wasalam, in praise and describing the worthiness of scholars that have been used by defenders of Wilayat al-Faqih, promoters of Wilayat al-Faqih, to prove Wilayat. They have 2 problems. Problem number 1, ضعف السند بعض. Some of them are weak. They have weak chains of narration. They're not reliable. That's one. Number two, even if we ignore the weakness of chain of narration, the problem is قاصر الدلالة على ثبوت الولاية بالمعنى المقصود. These ahadith, they fail to prove the point that's being claimed. They do not, these narrations, they do not prove a sort of leadership for the jurist that is paramount in Islam, that is equal to the authority of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, equal to the authority of the Imam alayhi salam. They simply do not prove that point. And then he talks about various ahadith, and then with regard to the maqbula specifically, وأما الحاكم في المقبولة فالظاهر منه من له وظيفة الحكم إما بمعنى الحكم بين الناس فيختص بفصل الخصومة أو مطلقة فيشمل الفتوى. He says, as far as the maqbula is concerned, maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbala, in which the Holy Imam alayhi salam says, I have verily appointed him as a hakim. Hakim could have two meanings. One, hakim, we know it means the judge, person who issues rulings, people's disputes. So he has been only appointed, merely appointed. What? As an arbitrator, a judge. The second meaning, a person who issues hukum, a person who issues fatwa and judicial ruling. So in his capacity as a judge, he issues judicial decisions and disputes, and in his capacity as mufti, he issues fatwa. So that hakim could mean these two things, either specifically a judge or a judge plus mufti. That's what could it mean. What could it mean? Nothing more than that. So the claim that the mujtahid has these vast powers, vast authority, same as the Holy Imam alayhi salam, same as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that is not what we can deduce, we can understand from this hadith. So whose assertion was that? That was the assertion of Ayatollah al-Hakim. Now let's go to Al-Khuy. You've heard of Al-Khuy. Al-Khuy was a very influential mujtahid, very influential marja. He died about 27 years ago, 1992 perhaps, 92, 91. Probably it was 1992 in An-Najaf al-Ashraf. He died of natural causes, of old age. And he was able to raise a very great number of other mujtahideen. So today, many senior scholars and maraji take pride in having been Khui's student. This is his book, At-Tanqih fi Sharh al-Makasib. Volume number 37. If you look at, all his books have been combined. Most of his books, Khui's books, are not been written by him. They are his lectures that have been rewritten, and they have been edited by his students, and they have been published. So these are his views, that he expressed these views in his lectures. Only a couple of his books have been written by himself, such as Ajwad al-Taqrirat, which are the lectures of his teacher, An-Na'ini, which Khui has written it in a form of book. At any rate, this is his book, Tanqih. Kitab al-Bay'. This is volume number 37 in the Encyclopedia of Khui, published by his office, by his organization. And that his encyclopedia, his entirety of all of the collection of works, is close to 55 volumes. So this would be volume number 37. And here, published by his own organization, alkhui.net, page number 164, he talks about al-Wilayat-e-Faqih. Velayat-e-Faqih. So what is Wilayat-e-Faqih? Al-Mutlaqa, the boundless, the absolute authority of Faqih, to have the same sort of power as the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It goes as follows. You perhaps have heard of the author of Al-Jawahir, Jawahir al-Kalam, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Najaf, rahimahullah. He was a jurist who lived in An-Najaf al-Ashraf, and he died about 1870s, as I recall. And he was quite famous, quite well known, and he is very influential. He is considered to be one of the very, very successful Shia jurists, very influential Shia jurists, and very, very uh, capable Shia jurists. If you count all Shia jurists and try to choose five most influential, most capable, most respected, of the highest preeminence amongst their peers, one of them would be Sahib al-Jawahir, very, very respected. So there was this guy that was contemporaneous to him, Mullah Mahdi Naraqi. You heard of him, Mullah Mahdi Naraqi? I showed you his book. Mullah Mahdi Naraqi believed in Velayat-e-Faqih. So, and Sheikh Muhammad Hussein al-Najaf, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Najafi, the author of Jawahir, did not believe in that. He narrates an incident, this incident here, this paragraph. He says that it has been narrated that a person who was contemporaneous to the author of Jawahir, who is Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Najafi, somebody, another scholar that was contemporary to his times, he used to believe in wilayat, that the jurist has the same authority as the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one day there was some sort of a meeting, and Sahib al-Jawahir, Muhammad Hassan Najafi, this very genius jurist, he was present there. And this person was present there. And Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Najafi, he criticized this assertion that the jurist would have the same powers as the Holy Imam alayhi salam. And of course, the other side, he disagreed. He rejected Muhammad Hassan Najafi's assertion. So Muhammad Hassan Najafi, in order to drive his point home, he said, okay, you say that the jurist has the same authority as the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I declare here your wife divorced. I'm the jurist, and from now on, you're divorced from your wife. You're no longer married. So the other person, what answer did he have? What response could he have? He said, oh, the problem is I doubt your ijtihad. I would have agreed to your decision. I would have agreed, and I would have stayed away from my wife. She would have become my ex-wife, actually. But since I doubt your ijtihad, I'm not going to respect your divorce, your ruling to divorce my wife. So, but the problem is, who he says, وَكَانَ لَهُ مَقَامٌ عِلْمِيٌّ شَامِخ. Who he says, however, we all know Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Najaf, his ijtihad is not dubious. He is one of the genius mujtahideen who has ever lived in Shia history. And then who he goes as follows: وكيف كان فيقع الكلام في ولاية الفقيه وأنها ثابتة على نحو يتمكن معها من التصرف في الأموال والأنفس نظير ولاية الإمام أو أنه لا ولاية له في شيء من ذلك أبدا. So the discussion of ولاية الفقيه, who he says, is as follows. Does the jurist have the same powers as the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as the Holy Imam alayhi salam, or he does not? He does not. So a jurist, if he has the same powers, same sort of authority as the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he has the power to form a government. He has the power to take over the treasury. It doesn't matter what people want. It doesn't matter if there's a democracy and people give votes and they choose a government. If a mujtahid wants, he could reject whatever people want. It doesn't matter. He appoints someone else as the president. He appoints someone else as on the treasury, contrary to what the parliament wants or what people have voted for. Or if there is no government, he could, or regardless of the government, he has the power to take over your life, to issue any sort of ruling in your private affairs. For instance, tell you that you're no longer allowed to live in your house. Go live in another place. You have to divorce your wife. You have to kill your father, or you have to go and blow yourself up in the public square. Then you will have to do that. You will have to do that because the mujtahid has the same authority as the Holy Imam alayhi salam. Or he takes over your bank account. You can no longer transfer your bank account into my name or this person's name. If a mujtahid says so, because he has the same authority as the noble Imam alayhi salam, if we agree to wilayat al-faqih, then he will have the same sort of power as the Imam alayhi salam, so he can ask you, please transfer every last dollar in your bank account into such and such person's bank. Then he goes as follows. أما الولاية بالمعنى الأول فمضافا إلى أنه مقطوعة العدم في حد نفسها. Says such a wilaya is indeed, quite clearly doesn't exist. This is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. So Hui outright, he rejects such wilaya. It does not exist at all. And then with regard to what we are discussing, Maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbala, he discusses at page 169. He mentions that some scholars have tried to interpret Hakim, فإني قد جعلت عليكم حاكم. Verily, I've appointed him over you as Hakim. The word Hakim. They have tried to interpret Hakim as the head of state, Hakim as the person who is the sovereign. However, he states clearly, that's not what it means. لأن الحاكم مرادف للقاضي وإنما المغاير له الوالي وهو عبارة عما يتولى الأمور. Hakim is muradif. Muradif in Arabic means coterminous, synonymous. Hakim is synonymous with qadi. Hakim means the same as judge. It means is synonymous, it's coterminous with, means the same thing as judge. Hakim. And what is opposite to the judge, the other authority, is the ruler, the head of the state, the sovereign, and that is al-wali. Al-wali. And wali is ibaratun amma yatawalla al-umur. Wali, the sovereign, he is the person who is the head of all of the society. The sovereign, the person who leads society politically, economically, militarily. He is the sovereign. He is the head of the state. And he says, ولم يقل إني جعلته عليكم واليا وإلا لتمت الدلالة على المدعى بأوضح وجه. The Imam alayhi salam clearly did not say that I'm appointing the narrator of hadith as wali, as the sovereign. No, if he had said so, then it would have been clear. The issue would have been settled. That the mujtahid or the narrator of hadith, he has been appointed as the sovereign, as head of state. But that's not what the hadith says. Hadith simply says that I've appointed him as an arbitrator, as a judge. Let's go to another book. This is التنقيح في شرح الأروة الوثقى. Again, تنقيح, volume number 1 of تنقيح by Al-Khud. The section on taqlid, published by his organization. Let's go. Get page number 321. Again, he talks about مقبولة of Umar ibn Hanbala. وقوله في مقبولة عمر بن حنظلة فإني قد جعلت عليكم حاكما أجنبي عن هذا المدعى لأنه بمعنى جعلته عليكم قاضيا. To claim that the مقبولة of Umar ibn Hanbala means that Imam alayhi salam says, I have appointed him as hakim over you, as sovereign head of a state over you. This meaning cannot be deduced from this. Why? Because I've appointed him as hakim means I've appointed him as judge over you. Does not mean as sovereign head of the state. So the hadith is not consistent with the claim of Velayat-e-Faqih that is being made by Khomeini and those scholars who are like Khomeini. Let me show you one more book of one book of ijtihad. This is Mabani Minhaj al-Salihin by Al-Hajj Sayyid Taqiyat Tabatabai al-Qummi rahimahullah. He was a marja who passed away only a few years ago. And he comes from a very, very respected family of maraja and jurists, and especially his father, Allah Hussein Tabatabai al-Qummi. He was very, very respected. He was a marja before Al-Hakim and I don't remember before Sayyid Abu Hassan Isfahani or after him. For a very, very brief period of time. And this is book Mabani Minhaj al-Salihin. And this person was persecuted. His brother was greatly persecuted. His brother was also a martyr. they were persecuted and constrained by the Iranian government because of their views about Wilayat. Mabani Minhaj al-Salihin, volume number 1 by Sayyid Taqi Tabatabai, page number 77. إن قلت إن المذكور في المقبولة فإني قد جعلت عليكم حاكما فهو الحاكم المطلق. If someone says to me, he's saying, if someone says, argues, that in Maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbala, Imam alayhi salam says, I have made him over you a hakim. And he says, hakim means a, a, a sovereign who is in every way a sovereign, mutlaq. His sovereignty is boundless. He's a head of state with a boundless but unlimited authority. If he says such a thing, I'll respond to him. Al-mustafadu minha ja'altu alaykum qadiyan. I'll respond to him that no, you don't know the hadith. You are reading it wrong. Hakim means judge. Hadith says that I've appointed him as judge over you. Simply that. مضافا إلى أن السند ضعيف بعمر. And in addition to that, there's a weak hadith, مقول of Umar ibn Hanbala. And according to Hu'i, according to Sistani, according to Wahid Khurasani, according to a majority of these maraja, they all maintain that this hadith is da'if anyway. So now we conclude our discussion with regard to this first hadith that have been used by promoters of Velayat-e-Faqih, and that is the maqula of Umar ibn Hanbala. In short, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam says, فَإِنِّي قَدْ جَعَلْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاكِمًا. Verily, I've appointed him as a hakim over you. Hakim simply means an arbitrator. And this is quite unfortunate and quite embarrassing that a person like Khomeini, whose followers claim that he's an imam, and on the basis of this hadith and some other hadith which are like this hadith, and they failed to prove his point, they have started this global fitna, this global far-reaching fitna, because of which millions of people have died and they continue to suffer. And every day, countless people die because of the actions of Khomeini, because of the movement of Khomeini, because of the ideology of Khomeini. And to be fair, it was not only Khomeini, but this political Islam that entered Shia realm. Khomeini was its leader. Khomeini was its most prominent patron, but it had many maraja and many other people also. They subscribed to the same ideology. And just something quite simple, hadith. They misunderstood that hadith. And they continue to mislead Shia and use these ahadith in order to misguide Shia youth, in order to claim Velayat-e-Faqih and leadership of the entire world. So my discussion with regard to this hadith ends. Let me add a couple more things, that there are other points also when you consider the maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbala. One is, and I'm going to answer your phone calls if you would like to call. If you have any questions, if you have any commentary with regard to this hadith, concept of Velayat-e-Faqih, Islamic government, if you have any sort of criticism, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, as long as you speak in English, and as long as I can understand, I will listen to you. And inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, if I know your answer, I'll respond to you. If I don't know your answer, I'll say I do not know the answer to the question. But a couple other points that have to be considered with regard to maqbula of Umar ibn Hanbala are as follows. One is, the maqbula is about narrator of hadith. Narrator of hadith is not about mujtahid. So the hadith is totally alien to mujtahideen in the first place. And mujtahideen are not narrators of hadith. That's one. Second, what could quite easily be understood from the context of the question was posed to the Imam alayhi salam. If you remember my lectures on the topic, there are many, many clues, several contextual evidence and textual evidence in the text of hadith and in the context and the life situation of the Holy Imam alayhi salam, that he was not appointing as sovereigns, he was not appointing heads of state. that could quite easily be understood. The contextual evidence that Imam alayhi salam used to live in Faqih, and he was not appointing head of state. That's well understood. And as long as he is present, why he would be appointing someone else? He is the Imam, right? If any person should be head of state, it's him, not other people. That would be ludicrous. Imam alayhi salam is Shia and being in such danger, such small numbers, they all being always being persecuted, himself being always constantly under government persecution. He would be appointing heads of state. No, that is quite ridiculous. And then the textual evidence, textual clues in the text of hadith, it's all talking about a dispute among two people who have difference of opinion whether they should should they do in their dispute. And the Imam alayhi salam respond that I'm appointing a judge for them. And narrator of hadith is a judge, and narrator of hadith is an arbitrator in the disputes. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, if you have any questions, any comments, I'd be very glad to hear your voice and to respond to your questions and listen to your criticism and comments. Let's see if you have any. Perhaps not. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الشريف. There's one more question with regard to a maqula of Marib that I respond to. And that argument goes as follows. Okay, promoters of Velayat-e-Faqih would go as follows. Okay, we agree that Hakim does not mean a ruler, a head of state. Hakim means a judge. However, a judge has to have the power to enforce his ruling. A judge have to have power to enforce his ruling. So if a judge doesn't have any power, the police does not listen to him, his decisions are not official, the government does not respect his decisions, then him being a judge is ludicrous. Is ludicrous. It doesn't have any benefit for the society. Therefore, if you agree that Imam alayhi salam has appointed the mujtahid as a judge, only common sense indicates that his decisions should have repercussions in the society. It should be enforceable. It should be respected. And of course, we know secular governments, they will not respect the mujtahideen's ruling. Therefore, we should have Islamic governments in order to have these judges control the judiciary. And so the police force, they would be legally bound to enforce the mujtahid's rulings. Understand how this argument goes? So they would say, okay, we agree. Hakim does not mean a head of state. Hakim simply means a judge. Okay, if we agree that only a mujtahid is the rightful judge, then this assumption necessitates that we establish Islamic government. When we establish Islamic government for the purpose so that the mujtahid, when he issues a ruling and settling people's disputes, his rulings would be respected in the society. Otherwise, this position of a judge is a joke. Which kind of a judge he is? The police does not respect him. His rulings do not have any official standing, and anybody could disagree and say, "Okay, you decide against me. I'm not going to listen to you. Goodbye." So, what is your answer to that? The solution to this is that we establish Islamic government, and then when we establish Islamic government, The judiciary would be in the hands of mujtahideen, and their decisions would be respected heavily. So the answer to this is the same as it was at the time of the Holy Imam alayhi salam. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is not appointing a judge with boundless powers who has the capacity to enforce his decisions. He's not appointing such a judge. If you read the hadith, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam clearly states that two disputing parties, they have to agree. They have to mutually agree that we are going to go to this person and accept his decisions as long as the decisions are according to the ruling of Ahlul Bayt alayhim. We are going to submit to his decision. So if we consider the hadith and the scope the hadith is talking about, and the authority the hadith is giving to a mujtahid, the Imam alayhi salam is not appointing a mujtahid with unlimited powers to enforce his decisions. No. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is appointing an arbitrator who is going to arbitrate between two disputing parties when they mutually agree. And if they do not mutually agree, then this narrator of hadith, he doesn't have any obligation to arbitrate or to listen to their case or to hear their arguments. Only if they mutually agree that we are going to accept and respect your decision as long as it is in conformity to hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim. If we understand that is when I'm disputing with you and we go to a narrator of hadith or a mujtahid for the sake of argument, if we agree that this means mujtahid, we go to him. And then we know if we mutually agree that we are going to accept this decision, then we do not have to have the power of police. The mujtahid does not have to have the power of police to enforce his decision. So that at the time of, how did it work in the time of the Holy Imam alayhi salam? The Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, in all these centuries, Shia used to settle their disputes by going to their scholars. How did it work? Shias did not. Islamic governments, Shias used to go to their local scholars or to scholars in other cities in order to settle their disputes, not because those scholars could force and compel people to respect their decisions. No, just because they used to go to them because they agree. They agree that we are going to submit this decision. Understand? So the argument that this required that we establish an Islamic government is rubbish. Rubbish, because the scope that is assigned, the scope of arbitration that's assigned to the narrator of hadith is quite limited. And that is when people agree that we are going to settle our disputes by going to this scholar. Even now, we go one step further. Let's say, okay, this judgeship, for the sake of argument, we say is unlimited. This is not just when people agree that we are going to accept the decision. This is a judgeship. This is a position of a judge that doesn't have such boundaries. Even when people do not agree, then we have to follow the mujtahid's decision. In such a case, in Shia majority countries, in Shia majority areas, they could always demand that the judiciary should be in the hands of ulama. And this was throughout history. Throughout history, in Islamic lands, the judiciary was always in the hands of scholars. And Shia majority areas, it was always Shia kings used to appoint Shia scholars as their judges. As their judges was always the practice. Many Shia scholars have been judges of kings, such as Sheikh Amili and many other scholars. They were judges. Some of them were even judges and for non-Shia kings. So they used to give fatwa according to Hanafi or Shafi'i for Hanafi and Shafi'i, and according to Shia for Shia. They used to settle disputes in such a manner. Shia scholars were judges for non-Shia kings in non-Shia majority areas. So in order for the judiciary to be in the hands of the scholars, religious scholars, this has been practiced throughout history and has never necessitated that the entire structure of the government be in the hands of scholars. It has never necessitated that. Because as we know, judiciary is one branch of the government. In order to be the head of the judges, the mujtahid does not need to be the head of the government as well. He does not need to be the chief executive, and he does not have to be chief of the legislative branch, and he does not have to be the head of state. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. May Allah bless you. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. May Allah bless you.
علي مولا علي علي مولا علي اي كياستي توبها ما خلق مئير نظري مرهمتي كن بمن فقير علي ما يراد شر ما يرقت وقشت خجل قمر في شيء تصرف كند بزير جاني عالم بفدایت علی جاني عالم بفدایت علی علي علي مولا علي علي مولا علي علي مولا